So I have a comment and a legitimate question. The comment being, while there's a lot of things I disagree with what you're saying, but I definitely agree with your opinions on how culture is ruining the black community and why blacks don't graduate from high school due to culture. I think there's an element that you might be missing, and I'm not sure if you brought it up before. In the late 60s, early 70s, or late 70s, early 80s, when CIA introduced crack into the black community, which started a snowball effect of, blacks being overly criminalized for drug possessions, black fathers leaving the home and not sticking around, which led into, in the 80s of black children being being brought up without fathers, with mothers not being able to give them proper discipline. And while I do agree today that black communities suffer, for not having fathers in the household, but equally due to the culture around them. Like, I suffered from it myself. If a black person wants to be educated in the hood, we get called house Negroes and Uncle Toms. If I want to better myself, but I was the element of originally introducing crack into those communities, which eliminated fathers from the home. I think those still have effects today. And while I agree that there isn't systemic racism keeping black people down now, I think the triggers that happened back then still affect us today.
Okay, so obviously past affects present, no question. The question is who committed the injustice and who should be punished for it. As far as the CIA introducing crack in the black community, I'm going to plead ignorance on this one because I have no idea whether that's true. Okay, but I will say that when it comes to single motherhood in the black community, that did not start in the 1980s with crack. That started in the mid-60s with the increase in welfare. The increase in the welfare state dramatically increased the level of single motherhood in the black community. It was 20% around 1960. Today, it's in excess of 70%. Yeah. And again, I don't think that the crack epidemic can actually explain all of that, because the crack epidemic really lasted from the early 80s to basically the early 90s. And you've seen it continue, the single motherhood's continued to grow actually in the black community. It's sort of stabilized now, but it continued to grow for a long while after that. Also, I think it's worthwhile noting that when we say things like, somebody introduced crack into the black community, whoever, quote unquote, introduced crack into the black community, and again, I have no information to substantiate your theory, but it is individuals who take crack, right? Unless you are forcibly being injected with crack, then you have to make the choice to take the crack in the first place. And it's also worth noting that there were a lot of black legislators in the inner city who were looking for harsher sentences on crack cocaine, specifically because it was an epidemic in the inner city and was ruining a lot of lives. So the only way I think that when it comes to the single greatest intergenerational poverty statistic, the only way to walk this back is not through reparations, I think. It's through it really is through culture. It's through reinculcating the idea that fathers need to stick around, and you're a bastard if you don't stick around after you father a child.
Absolutely. So my question...
And that's true for white, black, or green. It doesn't matter to me. I'm a dad of two. You abandon your kids, you are just the worst kind of piece of garbage.
Absolutely. So my question... I started getting involved in, so to speak, right-leaning issues after Milo came to Berkeley. I got assaulted by an Antifa member. He tried to set me on fire with a lit flare. He called me a Nazi. Just today, I got called a Nazi.
You don't look like a Nazi, I gotta tell you.
No. Just today, I got called a Nazi, a fascist, and I consider myself a left-leaning liberal centrist. Now, with that said, MAGA crew has shown me so much love in these past 8 months. Everyone I've met has been reasonable, opened up their homes to me. We've had wonderful discourse. So my question now is, as a person who, like I said, considers myself a liberal, and I interact with people, on the right and MAGA crew, I still have people in my own personal community that, say that, oh, you're talking to you're supporting white supremacy, you're talking to Nazis, you're supporting them. What would you say to a person like me who is open to discourse and people of all sides? How would you combat, or at least how would you approach people who come with me with hate and saying no, you're a bad person because you're hanging out with these people? Well, how should I approach them?
So I have a basic rule on this, and it's the same, again, regardless of color, because I've said this to people of every color. If somebody calls you a racist or a bigot based on no evidence, this makes them a bad person, and you have every right to say so. They need to actually cite evidence for why you're a racist or a bigot or a bad person before they can call you that. It needs to actually be justified. And you have every rationale to walk away from that conversation thinking that person is a worse person if they can't explain to you what you've done wrong and why what you've done is so terrible.
Okay, that works for me.
And thanks so much.
Thank you so much.